How you doing? How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you, Kayo?
I'm doing great. Good to see you. How's your day been so far? I know it's early over there for you.
Yeah, it is early. Just getting started.
Excellent, excellent. Well, yeah, let the viewers know who you are, what you do, and why you do it, Dawn.
Oh, okay. Let's start from there. I'm Dawn. I do a few different things. I'm a coach primarily. So I do career transition coaching and I do relationship coaching for couples in crisis. And so basically I support people through really big transition points in their lives. Um, I do it because I'm unbelievably passionate about it. I think like many great jobs, it taps into the things that I've struggled with the most myself. So things about neurodiversity and figuring out why you feel unseen or unheard, or like something doesn't feel like the right fit, or you feel like you don't belong or you're not connecting and you're not exactly sure why. And just helping first of all to kind of normalize some of those things and then help people develop a plan and actually move from here to there effectively, a lot of the stuff that we're not we're not taught in school. So yeah, that's why I do
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
do.
For sure. Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so when you look at your own journey and things like that, up until the point that you wanted to get into relationship coaching, what was the trigger for you, or what was the process for you to make you feel like this is what you want to do going forward?
Sure, yeah, it's an interesting journey. um my background is I was originally in the nonprofit community organizing social good space, um, and was kind of going from city to city and project to project, and eventually got burnt out, um, and wanted to see how I could still do meaningful, impactful work, but that felt more sustainable and more entrepreneurial, more of a career. And I wound up through a series of twists and turns, almost having like a spiritual journey, and finding myself at a school in New York that taught me about all the different major world traditions, spiritual traditions. And I ended up, my best friends at the time asked me to marry them. Um, and so I ended up in the wedding world and doing premarital counseling and working with couples who are marrying, specializing in sort of non-traditional, multicultural, bilingual, working with a lot of same-sex couples. Um, and I loved it so much that that's how the career coaching came about. I wanted to help other people find alignment in a non-traditional way that might not be looking at your resume or your degree or your skills, but looking at what drives you and getting creative about that. And then a few years ago, around the time the pandemic started, because I'd been working with couples for so long, even though I'm not a therapist, I was starting to hear from more and more couples that were not in a premarital. They were at different stages and they were struggling. And they were finding that for all different reasons, either they couldn't find a good couples counselor, people had long wait lists, or they just didn't feel that that was for them. Or sometimes they would find somebody, rarely, they'd find somebody they really liked and felt really good talking to, but they would feel like, look, we're going here week after week, paying a lot of money, spending an hour with somebody, and not that much is changing. It's nice to talk, but I go back home and things are the same.
Right, right.
So I wanted to start something that felt different. To me, the relationship coaching, it combines the safe space to be really vulnerable, go really deep of good couples counseling with the very practical tools from the world of habit research and the neuroscience of making changes and what we've learned about how men and women process differently and those kinds of things, and give people something tangible to get a plan, to get clarity, to actually shift things. Again, the stuff that most of us were not taught in school. um, to normalize things.
Pause for a little bit there. See if we can get you back. Excellent. We got you back. We got you back. Yeah. So
I'll be
you
back.
kind of finish your thought if you remember what you were saying.
Yeah, no, I think that's where it was, is just how all of that came together to offer couples what I think is not really out there, just the best of counseling with the really practical tools from coaching. I kind of tease, but I say I'm always trying to talk myself out of a job. My
Yeah.
my goal is that you take this knowledge and this information and these tools and you implement that. And that's the goal of the program. So it's much more short term than traditional counseling.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you mentioned like you're feeling burnt out at some point. That often happens when we like no longer have a love for what we're doing, or sometimes we feel like we can't make a difference or an impact no more. So then it's easy to get burnt out in that kind of situation. But looking further into relationships, we've all had different struggles in previous relationships, and we navigate through those to get to where we are now. What would you say some of your struggles have been in previous relationships, and how did you navigate through those to get to where you are now?
Mm, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, cobbler has no shoes. That's part of what brings me to this work is that I'm very open about having over the top ADHD. I have a history of anxiety. So, relationships have been tough. I'm divorced. Um, and I think one of the things that I just gave my first TED Talk, and one of the things we talk about is that um, not only do men and women tend to process and compartmentalize differently, but when you add sort of sensitivity and ADHD and anxiety and these other things on top of it, it can become that there's this sort of processing where everything gets amplified and accelerated. And um, whereas others can compartmentalize, I don't compartmentalize. And so everything starts to feel interconnected and can escalate quickly. And then if the other person is like, whoa, what's going on here? Let's take a break. That can make it amplify even more because I'm an internal processor, as many women are. It's not always on gender lines, but that internal processing means that when things are all connected and it's hard to unravel it, things can escalate quickly. And so I definitely had that. And I definitely tended to be with partners who are more the compartmentalizers, who are like, okay, let's just take some space and revisit this. And so part of this journey has been learning and then sharing with others some of the tools that you can do when you encounter those dynamics. It's almost universal with couples that I've seen that one person is the one who wants to like talk things out right away and the other needs some space. And if that's not handled in a way that's thoughtful to both, it can lead to a lot of problems. So that's been at the heart of a lot of the challenges that I've experienced, and certainly learning what the research shows on it has been really helpful.
Yeah. So like, having that kind of like issue of communication and the difference with your partner that communicates in a different way, like how are you able to talk it through to the point that your partner can understand your way of communicating and you can understand their way of communicating and kind of find that balance between you?
Right, right. And so I think the trick there is that when things do escalate, when we're dysregulated, um, we cannot have critical thinking capacity. We can't think logically. And so it's important to take space, but just to be very clear about what that space looks like. How long is it? How much is it? How are we going to reconnect? Because for the person that wants to talk things out and has all of that internal stuff going on, if the other person walks away, even though our rational mind knows that's my partner, they'll probably be back in a few minutes, but there's a deeper part of us. Then we get into like attachment styles and stuff, but there's a deeper part that can really feel a sense of abandonment when the partner goes away, and that can make things accelerate even more. So I think, the solution to it is take time outs, but be very, very clear that, hey, I'll be back. I'll be back in 10 minutes. I'll be back in an hour, whatever it is, but give it a bucket, give it a window. Um, and then talk about it, because another really common thing I hear and I've experienced myself is that the one who compartmentalizes is often able to, in an hour, go, yeah, I don't really want to or have a need to talk it out. So like I'm back, but doesn't revisit it. And that can cause problems as well. So yeah, just that very direct communication. I think a lot of times we assume that our partner should know us better than anybody. We don't need to spell it all out. That's another myth. So definitely to talk it through, be very direct and know what those windows are that can give both of you what you need.
Yeah, for sure, for
Does
sure.
that address what you were
Yeah,
asking?
that was very helpful actually. Yeah, it
Nice.
actually explained the situation pretty well. So yeah, thanks for that. And some people like when they find out that they have issues with communication within a relationship, like we're talking about, they'd rather not deal with it. So they kind of immerse themselves into their work more and focus more on their professional career. Like
Mm.
the relationship is actually causing them too much anxiety, but they feel like they can navigate their way around their professional life a lot better. So when they start to,
Interesting. That's a good
yeah,
point.
right, right. So when they start to focus heavily on their professional career, uh, they start to neglect their personal life and their intimate life in that process. So
Mm,
then
good point.
they don't know how to then bridge the gap after that. Because they do realize that they need intimacy, but they focus so much on their professional life that they don't know how to bridge that gap. So, in your opinion, how can they start to bridge that gap again after focusing so heavily on their professional career?
That's such a good point, Kayo. And I wonder if I'm going to guess there's definitely a correlation between the people who are able to do that and those who are more um, the waffle, right? The compartmentalizer, those that are able to sort of process in that way where they kind of put things in buckets like that. And I think one of the things I'm a really big fan of for couples is having a lot of rituals, having these sort of touchstones that are not based on the emotionality of the moment. So it's not where there's an eruption and, oh my gosh, you're spending so much time on your work. We don't have time for ourselves anymore. What are you going to do about it? Because then we're tired and we're stressed and we're defensive and we're reactive. But deciding in advance on some pockets of time that you you really make sacred. These are these sort of touchstones for the relationship that, hey, every week on Thursdays at 7, let's have an hour where we just hang out, talk about the relationship, talk about how we're feeling, maybe the highs and lows of the week, right? Or that we have these other pockets where we're going to go on a hike or we're going to go for a walk or we're going to cook together and you can share what's on your mind or we can walk through some stuff we haven't been able to figure out before or whatever. So I think that idea of sort of ritualizing things so that it's not just about dealing with them in the moment. One of the things I tell couples is that as we're doing this work, it's always like, how can we set up your lifestyle so that these things become easier, that you feel more close, you feel more connected? And then separately, what do we do if blowups happen anyways? So there's the setup and then there's, yeah, but things are always going to happen. So what do you do in the moment?
Yeah, for sure. Like you was talking about, creating that quality time is great for people within relationships, even if they're focused on their career. Like it's still important to have that quality time and time together for the relationship to really thrive going forward. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. But for some people, like the relationship has actually ended because of this anxiety, and they've actually broken away from the relationship. So it's not even about quality
Yeah.
time no more. It's more
Yeah.
about for them like how they can find the type of relationship again after having a broken relationship
That's
in the
right.
past. So they're looking forward at how they can do that, but they don't want to go through what they've been through again. So for this type of person that's kind of scared and worried about how to move forward in their intimate life, what kind of steps can they take to start feeling comfortable again, to start dating and getting into a relationship again?
Ooh, that's a layered question. I think to an extent it's a case by case basis, but I think, the important part, and because I'm working with couples in crisis, this is often their last ditch effort. This is really like, if this doesn't work, we're done. And even then, often what we do is we develop a plan. And usually it's a 90-day plan because it has to do with the neuroscience of how long it takes for major changes to shift and get rebuilt. Um, but for many of them, this is work that they're doing regardless of whether they're going to stay together or not. And I think where that ties into your question is it's so important for each of us to figure out what's mine to own in whatever happened, what's not mine to own. What are things that are just a matter of that was the dynamic and it's a dynamic I don't want to replicate? And what are the things that I can work on because I want to work on them because they're meaningful to me, not because somebody else said so or because it would make it work with that person, but because I want to develop more compassion or be a better listener or not have my ADHD distracting me all the time where I'm interrupting people. What are the things that that I can work on regardless of who this other person is. Um, Yeah, so I think that's the important part to really, and sometimes, as basic as that sounds, it's not easy because it can take us weeks, months, years to unravel how much of this was situation specific and how much was really me and that person and the stuff that we each need to work on. But I think that would be the starting point, is what is there in me that I want to work on regardless of who I'm with? And then finding somebody where you feel regulated, you feel like this person's going to accept you, um, flaws and all, but that doesn't mean we don't continue the journey and keep working on ourselves.
Yeah, that self-work is key, like regardless of if we're in a relationship or even a single, because that's how we develop as people, as individuals, to show up for our partner. We must understand ourselves first. So for some people, they've done that self-work and they feel like they've they feel more secure within themselves, right? But when they look at how they want to go forward into relationships now, they start looking at different relationship dynamics and what can work for them. They start looking at things like monogamy versus non-monogamy, and
Sure.
maybe like something else will work better for them. So, in that context, what is your viewpoint on monogamy versus non-monogamy?
You know, my entire work is based on the idea that we should rewrite a lot of the sort of best practices that so many of us were taught. That's my biggest that's what my TED Talk was about. That's what I write about and speak about, is rewriting outdated relationship myths. So my personal philosophy is you get to make your own rules as long as you're doing it consensually and lovingly and with intention. You're not doing it because you've heard about it and it's a fad and, oh, everybody else is doing it, maybe we should do it. I mean, that's the whole point, is I don't want you doing what everybody else is doing. Cultivate something that makes sense for you because you decide. I know I'm going on a little bit of a tangent
No,
here,
go
but
ahead, go ahead.
they say that something like, I've heard different statistics, but between 50 and 90% of what we do every single day is habit that we did not intentionally choose. And and within that, they say that we make between 33 and 35,000 choices per day. So if you translate that, the vast majority of those choices are choices that we're not being intentional about. So much of our day is just, we do it because you do it. You don't think about it. It was just, that's the way it's always been. That's what was passed on to us. And I think it's so important to become really aware of that. What am I doing because I have chosen it intentionally as a path that's meaningful and in alignment for me? And how much am I doing just because we've been taught that that's just the way it is? So, in that sense, I'm wide open to you make your own rules as long as you're doing it lovingly, consensually, with intention.
Yeah. Being intentional with our choices, for sure, for sure. Yeah, like some people, like they want to be intentional with their choices, like you've mentioned, but maybe they're in a relationship, maybe it's a monogamous relationship, and they're thinking about how they can possibly open up the relationship, and they want to communicate this with intention to their partner, but they're worried about how their partner's going to receive this information and if it's going to disrupt the relationship. So
Sure.
how can they start to have this conversation with their partner without disrupting the relationship too much?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the answer to that is like it is for any difficult conversation. Um, Timing is very important. Uh we use up our capacity for like real critical thinking, for being able to process something with that kind of intention. That capacity is mostly used up pretty much by late morning. So we only have about 2 hours of that capacity per day. And it tends to start about an hour, hour and a half after we wake up. So, don't have those really intense, difficult conversations late at night, for one. Um, and I think it's important, the basics, put it in terms of I statements, put it in terms of yourself, make sure it's not sounding like something, accusatory, or that you're telling your partner they need to do something differently. Um, be prepared that it may not go the way you want, and that's okay. Because you're asking for something that's really new. I think one more tip I would give is that so often I think when we are feeling really heightened about something, something's really important to us, and we feel like a decision needs to be made, we kind of think of it as one decision. So using your example, I think a lot of times that conversation feels like it has to be, okay, I'm going to share with my partner all the reasons this is important to me. And hopefully they're going to say, yes, we can do this. And then it's done. It's like we're going from monogamy to non-monogamy. But often those things can be broken down. You can make a choice about one little tiny piece of it. For example, if you've never broached this conversation before, maybe the goal of the first conversation is just, would you be willing to talk about this, you know, once a week? Or can we have a bigger conversation? Are you open to even approaching this conversation? Can we have another conversation next week? Or, hey, I have a book I want you to read. Or, hey, there's an event we might want to go to. Or I have this couple that, these are friends of ours and you may not know, but they're actually in a non-traditional relationship. Can we have them over for a glass of wine and talk about it? Right. So it's not all or nothing. It's what's the next step.
Right, right, right. So essentially being patient with it and taking it, like you said, step by step and letting the response come back and seeing how that could work going forward. Is that basically what you're trying to say?
Yeah, let them know why it's meaningful to you and chunk it out, right? So I like the idea that all of these big conversations, I think having a goal or an intention to the conversation is great. So there is an outcome, not that you're going to force that outcome because there's two of you, but
Mhm.
you're coming into it going, a win for me would be my partner agrees to have another conversation next week or to go to an event or to meet these people. That would be a win. So you're going in with that idea.
Yeah.
I think that can be helpful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sometimes, like the kind of backlash that people receive from speaking about this type of a topic to their partner is that there's something missing in our relationship. If you want to do that, it means that
Mm.
something must be missing in our relationship. Do you think there's some truth to that, or do you think like there can be a non-monogamous relationship without there being something missing in the relationship?
That's such a personal question. I don't think it's a question for me to answer on a personal level. I mean, the short answer is no. I absolutely think there are times where a couple can decide on that, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong or anything that's there or not there that should or shouldn't be. You look at the work of, Esther Perel, who's so popular because she talks about this idea that so many of us have been brought up to have this fairy tale version of you find your princess or your knight in shining armor and it's happily ever after and that's that and this person is supposed to be your everything and that's just not realistic. We don't live in those. I don't think that was ever realistic, but certainly not in these times. This person, that's too much pressure. No one person should be our everything. There's great books that your viewers and listeners are probably familiar with, but like The Ethical Slut, which has been around for a while. So these books that talk about what can these non-monogamous and more open relationships look like, and why can they actually be beneficial in the sense of tapping into all these things that have nothing to do with how much love you have or how good a person this is to you. So, I mean, the short answer is, of course, it's possible to do that and not have it mean that there's something wrong or missing in the relationship. But I also don't want to push that non-monogamy is for everyone because I don't think it is.
Right,
So,
right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. So moving forward, like looking at people that are monogamous now, like monogamy is what they've both chosen and the path that they've chosen to go down. But a lot, like sometimes, like there can still be jealousy within relationships where one partner is always saying that the other partner is looking at this person or talking to this person, and the partner
yes.
constantly being accused is like, well, I might as well do something if I'm going to be accused all the time, right? So how can the partner that's always been accused start to communicate to their partner that there's nothing to be jealous about? And how can a person that's always being jealous start to deal with their jealousy?
Oh, you nailed it, Kayo. That's such a big one. That's the number one situation that people come to me for. That's it. And you described it really well. It's not just one versus the other. It causes a lot of harm and pain and frustration to both sides. Oh gosh, that's a deep and complicated question. I mean, my short answer is find somebody neutral, a great coach or counselor that can support you too, because for something that intense, like trust and jealousy, that's hard to prove one way or the other. That's probably the toughest situation I see couples go through, where you just can't, it's almost impossible to hear your partner with a clean slate, because for whatever reason you have these constructs in your head of what the reality of the situation is. And maybe that comes from actual trust issues or betrayal that have happened within the relationship. Often, as I'm sure you've seen and know, often it comes from the past, right? Often it comes from childhood trauma, or things that we've seen in past relationships, or seen things that we've brought up, with our backgrounds and cultures to think this is common. That is a really, really difficult situation, and it's so destructive. One of the things I tell couples is that you can prove yourself untrustworthy in a millisecond, right? Somebody finds something out or something happens and trust is gone. Now, to prove that you are trustworthy is really, really difficult. How do you prove to somebody that they have nothing to worry about, that you are trustworthy, that nothing's ever going to happen? And that's where that destructive part comes. So it's so common that the one who thinks there's betrayal is just asking these questions over and over and over. I've never seen a situation where that has been beneficial to the relationship. Asking those repeated questions, trying to get more information, trying to get some peace of mind, trying to assure themselves that they have the full story. I've never actually seen that work. Checking somebody's phone, checking their location, going through their stuff, never seen it work. So, if they can afford the time and energy for it, I think that's a thing where having even a few sessions with somebody that can be neutral and help both parties walk through it can be incredibly helpful.
Right.
If that's not something you could do, I think you have to make a decision if you're willing to give your partner the benefit of the doubt, to have very thoughtful, slow, intentional conversations where you are focusing on one person speaks, the other person repeats what they heard exactly, not paraphrasing, not putting it through their filters, and going back and forth like that to really hear each other out, because it's so hard not to be defensive or reactive on both sides when it comes to that situation.
Right.
And trying to develop a plan, saying, okay, how are we going to actually tackle this in a practical way that's focusing on, the last thing I'll say on this, focus on what you are trying to build together, what you intend to build together, not on what you don't want.
Right.
The
Right.
focus on, I don't want you to be doing this. I think you might be doing this. I want you to stop with the questions. Stop focusing on the negative, which is so hard, and build what you do want and give your partner the benefit of the doubt if you can.
Right, right, right. For sure, for sure. Now, sometimes there's actually some truth to it when someone is jealous. It's not for no reason, because
Sure.
something has happened. Someone has stepped out of the relationship and infidelity has happened. Now,
Absolutely.
often the person that has stepped out doesn't tell their partner about it, and they keep it to themselves, to the point that some people start to feel a sense of guilt about what has happened, and they would like to share it with their partner. So how can someone that has stepped out of a relationship now
Oof.
come and share this information with their partner? And if there's a way for them to do it without destroying the relationship, and how can their partner receive this information?
Oh, that's so tough. Yeah. I don't know that I can give you an absolute on that. I think it goes back to what I'm saying. Find the right time of day.
Right.
Find a really quiet, calm space. Set a goal for yourself for that conversation. What is your intention? Is your intention just to be heard? Do you want to ask for forgiveness? Do you want your partner to understand more of the why of, what's the backstory to this? What does it mean? Um, what's the goal of that initial conversation? Um, and it's almost impossible to do, but for both sides to really try not to be defensive or reactive, to try to hear, repeat, and then, decide how to move forward. For the one that was betrayed, I don't think you can make decisions in that moment. I think the goal is to give yourself space, find somebody safe you can process it through with, and give yourself as much time as you need. And that doesn't mean that there's not stuff on both sides. Sometimes betrayal comes almost out of the blue because of whatever that person is dealing with from their past. But often betrayal happens because there are issues on both sides of the relationship. And it is possible. People often ask me, like, can we come back from this? It is possible, not always, but not only is it possible, but often that catalyst is an opportunity to create something that was never there, to create something for almost from scratch, where now we're going to have these deep, meaningful conversations. Now we're going to be intimate with each other in a way we never were. Now we're going to communicate in this really meaningful, thoughtful way that we never had. So I've seen betrayal come back and turn into something that is deeper and more connected than what was ever there before. Not every time, but it's possible.
Yeah, right. Now, a quick one, like some when we look at brand new relationship now, like some people when they embark on a brand new relationship, they really want to immerse themselves in this new relationship because they're feeling a lot of butterflies, a lot of chemistry, right? To the
Sure.
point that some people start to lose their sense of self in the process. So, how could people embark on a new relationship without losing their sense of self in the process, in your opinion?
Let me know when you figure it out.
Excellent,
Oh,
excellent.
that's tough. I think, just the way you framed it, right? Going in with that awareness, knowing that that's a possibility. I think one of the biggest things I'd caution people, and this is something I've done, is notice if you're filling in the blanks. So notice if you have something that you've been wanting for so long, or you have this sort of checklist that you're looking for in a partner.
Mhm.
And because it's so exciting at the beginning, because we're showing us our best selves, because we have the initial feeling of, oh my gosh, this person checks all the boxes, are you then internally filling in the blanks? And this ties into everything we've talked about today is it fact or am I making assumptions? Right?
Excellent.
It's one of the most basic exercises from cognitive behavioral therapy is when you feel, triggered or something has you heightened to ask yourself, which part of this is fact, which part of it is an opinion or assumption,
Excellent.
right? And so I think especially that's an example of something that feels positive where we tend to do that, but it's not always positive. Sometimes even that part where it's like, oh my gosh, we're so excited, this person is all the things, that can actually be frustrating for the other person who's like, I'm not these things. You don't know me yet. Don't put me on this pedestal. Don't assume these things about me because I want you to see me for who I really am.
Excellent.
So I
So,
think constantly asking ourselves, which piece of this is fact? Where am I making assumptions? How can I slow down a little? It can be helpful.
excellent, excellent. So, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I would like to allow the viewers to be able to contact you. So, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for everything that you shared. Where can people find you, find out more about you, and find out more about what you do?
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled. The best way to reach me is relationshipcoachdawn.com. So Dawn is DAWN. Relationshipcoachdawn.com is where you can find me. You can schedule free consultations that will be directly with me. So I would love to chat with you, whether it's about sessions or just to comment or ask questions or vibe a little about this conversation.
Fantastic. And for the viewers, all of her website will be in the description and her
Beautiful.
socials as well. So you can get in touch with Dawn and find out more about what she does. Once again, Dawn, thank you so much for coming on. Any final words before we wrap up real quick?
Just take care of yourselves and each other. And thank you for the opportunity, Kayo. It was great having this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Dawn.